Welcome to Excel Business Math Series number 42. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on my YouTube channel, then click on my college website link, and you can download the workbook 135, Chapter 5. If you're enrolled in the class, just go to our Chapter 5 website. Hey, we got to talk about income tax withholdings. Yeah, we got to have some of our earnings withheld to pay the federal government for our federal income taxes. Now that's pay as you go. You can't wait till the end. They want to take their money as you make it. So from each paycheck, you have some amount withheld. Now here's some notes here, and you can read in your textbook, but I'm going to scroll over and show you how to do the calculations. There's two ways we're going to look at: the wage bracket method, and then we'll look at the percentage method. Wage bracket method. We have some information about an employee, things like how often they're paid weekly, whether they're single or married or head of household. Here's a biweekly one down here. And you have a bunch of tables. Now they can be in a book or digitized. I have a few of the tables here. I want to go look over here. Let's see, this is a weekly, so it's weekly. $690 for the week, and single, and that's our gross amount. So we have to find a weekly single table. Here it is, single weekly. We turn to this page in our tax book or in our digital file. And you need to know the number of allowances, and then you have to look up the amount that they have for the week. So at the top it says single weekly. So the only thing we can look up here is single weekly. Now what is an allowance? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are how many people you are claiming on your tax return. The more people, the more tax that the less tax will be withheld. So if it's just you yourself, you'll have $60. But if you are married, that would be 2, and have 2 children, that would be 4. So the tax would only be 31 instead of 1. Now, 0 would mean they wouldn't, you would be claiming nobody. The only way that you want to do that is, A, if you want a bigger refund, which you're not supposed to do when you fill out all of your tax forms. However, if you have earnings from other sources that are not being taxed, by putting a 0 here, they'll take out too much. But we're not really talking about the taxes here and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about the math of it. You got to look up 4 and then some amount here, and the intersection of those two will tell us the tax. Let's go back here and see if we can do it weekly, single, so we got the right table. 690 and 0 allowances. So we're going to go over here. The first trick is to find the 690. Now notice this says at least but less than. That means, and by the way, you can scroll up and down. This is a huge table, right? At least $60, but less than 65. Notice this is English. If you just stop a moment and read it carefully, you won't get confused. At least. That means the smallest amount your paycheck can be is $65, right? But less than. But less than 70 means not 70. That's why there's a 70 here and here. So at least 65. So the smallest number your weekly pay could be for this row is 65. And all the way up to, but not including 70, but less than 70. So if it's in between those two, 65 or greater, less than 70, then it's in this row. If it was exactly 70, you'd have to jump down to this one. So let's go back over here. 690 and 0. So we scroll down. Scroll, I'm using my roller ball here. 690. There it is. So it's this one, right? No way. Don't do that on the test. At least 680, but less than 690. Oh, here it is. Here's the at least. So the least amount this row could be, the least amount this row could be is 690, so that's it. 0, so the intersection of that and this is 94. So we go back over here and we put 94. Enter. You could do a sheet reference there too, but we're not going to do that. Now here it is, weekly married. So we have to go to a different sheet, so we turn to a different page. $1,105.50 and 4. So I'm going to go over here. I have to find that 1,000. So it's 1,000. I've already forgotten what it is. Go over here and look. Back here. Oh, 1105.5. 1105. Okay, so here it is. 110. Okay, so 05 is somewhere in between these two numbers. So this is the row we want. We go from this row over to this column that has 4, and it's 89 bucks. So we come back over here and we slap an 89 bucks here. $89. Now we come down here, the next example. Oh, we have a biweekly single. So that's over here, I see. $1,405, 2 allowances. So I come over here, completely different sheet. $1,405. So it's somewhere in between these values, and it's 2 allowances, so it's 143. So I come back over here, that little green sheet. Ooh, if I can't see it, I can always use that arrow and then click on there. So this would be 143. Hey, wait a second, I've already forgotten. Man, I wish I could. Oh, there it is, 143. All right, now one last one. Biweekly and married. The only trick is we got to find that number in between two numbers. So it's a $1,111.25. Biweekly married. So I use my scroll arrows. I find my sheet. Okay, so here it is. It's somewhere in between here. This is 1,100. This is 1,120. So ours was 1,111 and 50 cents. So it's this line right here. And the allowances, let's see, what were our allowances? Scroll back over. Oh, 6. Wow, so I'm going to scroll back over, go to here. 6, so it's way out here. $2. So we only have $2 of tax. So that's the wage bracket method. And there are formulas to automatically retrieve that, but they would go beyond the scope of this class. If you search my YouTube site, I have some videos about how to do that. All right, let's go over and do the percentage method. And we're going to have 2 examples. This one has a lot of steps. Okay. Let's look at our employee first. We have Joe. Pay period is weekly. Gross earnings, there they are. Marital status, single. We have 4 allowances. We got to figure out what is the federal withholding tax. Well, we need a couple things here. Let's go up and look here. We're going to need to know, this is a percentage method, amount for 1 withholding allowance. So here's, if you have 1, you get a weekly, and your pay period is weekly, you get an allowance of 59. Now, an allowance is the number of people you're claiming on your tax form. So the withholding allowance, this is in essence the amount that we're going to subtract from our gross to get some taxable amount, and then we'll multiply the rate times that. But what this is the government saying, hey, listen, if you have one person and you have a weekly paycheck, we're going to let you keep $59.62 and not tax that, because we know you need some of that money not taxed to pay for everything. So that is what that is. But once we get our final amount, then we're going to have to stay on this sheet right here. But we're going to have to scroll over, and we're going to have this tax table. So once we figure out what our taxable earnings are, we're going to have to look here, and it's the same thing over but not over. Notice that other table had some different words. These are still the same tables put out to figure out what your federal income tax, but now they have different labels. So over this one, but not over this one. It's the same setup. It's a slightly different setup, I mean. This one's over, so it can't be that one, but not over that one. So it's really the reverse, right? Over 147, which means 187. 187 is not included on this line, but not over this means $592 is. Why they wouldn't have some universal way to label these, I don't know. But once we figure out what line we're on, we're going to be given a tax rate and the taxes already calculated from earlier brackets. So if we determine that we're on this line, whatever earnings over this amount right here will be taxed at 28%, and the taxes from all the earlier brackets, which they've already calculated for you, are going to be this $255.60. Now, it sounds confusing, and it is a lot of steps, but we have written here the 4 steps. And it will be pretty straightforward if we just follow these steps. And these steps are also in the textbook. All right, step 1. Oh, we have to find, let me scroll here. OK, so here's Joe, weekly, the amount, single 4. Step 1, find the withholding allowance for one person. Use the percentage method income tax withholding table. Well, that's up above here, right? So all it is going up here and finding the amount for one withholding. Oh, it's $59.62. So I'm going to come down here and type in 59.62. You could also do a reference up there if you want. So that's it for step number 1. Whew. Now, step 2, multiply the number of withholding times the allowance for one person. That's the allowance for one person. And where are there's our allowances. So number of allowances, we're going to say 4 because he wrote down 4, so I'm going to put 4. One withholding allowance, well, I'm going to say equals this. Now, what do we have to do? Total earnings that are exempt. So this is for a single person. It comes from that table above. But since we have 4 allowances, we're going to have to multiply them to figure out what amount of our earnings is not going to be taxed. So we're going to have to use our round equals round. This amount here times this amount here, comma, to close parentheses. All we did is we took this allowance for one person and multiplied it by 4. So there it is. Isn't that nice? They're going to let us keep that amount of our current weekly earnings and not tax it. All right, so our weekly gross, we have to relist that here. And then our total earnings that are exempt right there. So I'm going to say equals and go get this amount right here. And then I'm going to say equal and get this amount right here. And earnings that are taxed this week. So here's our total. They're going to let us keep this and not tax that, so we need to do subtraction. Equals that one minus this one right there. That will give us our earnings that are taxed this week. Now, step 4. All right, tax from part 1, amount from previous brackets. So we're going to take, I have to go look up in the table. We're going to take this number here, $1,602.02, and find the actual row in that tax table up there, which will give us our tax rate and our amount of tax from the previous brackets. This is going to be our amount from previous brackets. We'll calculate our tax for this current line here at 28%, and then we'll add them up. So we have to take this, come up to this table. And they did this funny thing here, over but not. So we have a 1,000. I've already forgotten what it is. I'm going to $1,662.02. 1,000. So I bump it. OK, so I got that. So somewhere it's between these two right here. Remember, it's got to be over this. If it's exactly on that, it sits on this line. So over this, but not over this. It sits right in between. So we need a 28%. And there's the tax already calculated from the earlier brackets. See, because we have lower rates and they get higher as we go forward. So you have to put the 255.60 and the 28%. 255, you know, I can't remember that. I'm going to say equals and go up and get it. It's already written up here. There it is. This line right here. So I'm going to select that. Enter. That's the taxes from earlier brackets. Now, here's the tricky part, right? We have this $1,662.02. But let's go look at that table because a lot of this has already been taxed. In fact, $255 in tax we're already paying. Let's go up here and look. The way it works is from here, $51, well, not over $51, you have a 0 tax. But from 51 to 87, you have to calculate whatever your amount was. But when we get to here, 187 to 592, they've already calculated the 1390 that would you would have paid from this bracket right here. When we get to this line right here, they've already calculated the 74.52 from both of these earlier smaller tax rates. Finally, when for us, we get down to here, they calculated this 255.60 from all of these earlier brackets at lower tax rates. The only trick is, what amount is taxed at 28? Well, there it is. There is the bottom end of this. Our number is somewhere in between. So we have to take our somewhere in between and subtract that number right there and multiply it by 28%. So we come down here, and I'm going to do this all inside of the round function. Equals round. And we have to get our taxable earnings. That's this amount right here. That's the amount that's somewhere in between. So that one there. Minus, come up here, this earlier amount. Now I want to scroll down and take a look at that. Now, order of operations, we're doing subtraction here. If we want to multiply it by that 28%, we're actually going to have to click here and put parentheses around it. And then multiply that times our 28%. Then I can scroll down. So that's our calculation for this one here. Comma 2, close parentheses, and enter. So 96.61. Now we add Alt equals, and we have our tax. Wow, so which one would you rather do if you are doing the taxes? You'd probably want to do the wage bracket method. You just look it up, and there it's calculated. All right, so but that was one for a single person. Let's go ahead and do this again. For Joe is all of a sudden, it says single, but we need married here. So change that to married, and let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see. All right, so we have allowance table. And over here, we have a different set of numbers for married weekly. Again, these will, you would all, if you were doing the payroll, you'd get these from the IRS or whatever federal website you would go to download the tables. Or, for example, if you have a program like QuickBooks, it's probably already in it. Nevertheless, we have ours here on this sheet to practice the math of this using Excel. Here's Joe, weekly. There's the amount, married, and 4 allowances. What is the federal withholding tax? Hey, step 1, we got to figure out 1 withholding. So we just go look it up in the table. This time I'm not going to mess around. I'm going to say equals and click up here. 1 weekly allowance withholding. So they said for a week for 1 person, you get to keep that amount. But we have more than 1 person. We have 4. So in our next step, we say number of allowances, 4. Enter, enter. 1 withholding allowance. We already got that one right there. And then we need to multiply these. Equals round. That one times this one. Comma 2, close parentheses. So 238.48. Oh, well, isn't that nice? They're going to let us keep that amount of our earnings and not tax that, but they'll tax the rest. So our weekly gross equals, I'm going to get that amount up here. Total earnings that are exempt. That is this amount we just calculated in step 2. And finally, then we subtract them. Minus, so for 4 people, they're saying, oh, for the week, you can keep $238.48. Finally, step 4. We need to figure out which line we are on, which row, find the rate, and the tax from the previous bracket. So I'm going to take this amount, 151152, and go up here and look. In fact, I'm going to type equals and scroll on up. So it looks like we're somewhere here, over this, but not over this. So we're right in between here. So there's our rate, and I'm going to click on the tax from a previous bracket, $149.90, and then I hit Enter. Oh, it jumps me right back down. Now, we need to do that same thing. This amount, just to remind ourselves, we'll scroll up before doing the formula. We're in this line right here. Here's the lower end. Our number is somewhere in between. So we need to take that somewhere in between and subtract this. That is the amount that's going to be taxed by times that 25%. So I scroll down here. Equals round. open parentheses. I'm going to take this amount minus, scroll on up here. We were somewhere in between here, so we have to subtract the lower end. That gives us the distance between the low end and then whatever's our number right in between. I'm going to close parentheses, and watch this up here. Close parentheses times, and now I'm going to get this rate. Now I can scroll down because it'll be a little bit easier to see here. Comma 2 close parentheses. Enter. And then Alt equals to add them up. So that is the percentage method. Two last quick topics, state withholding and then total owed to the IRS. State withholding. Hey, here's our little setup. We have gross earnings of this and state income tax rate of this. It's simply multiplying. Now, each state does it different. This is a simplified example. But for us, it's simple. We're just going to multiply. Equals round that rate times that gross, comma 2, close parentheses. And of course, if this was a word problem, you would type your answers out. If June had monthly gross earnings of this and the state income tax was that, her state withholding income tax would be that. Total owed to the IRS. Oh, this is for a business. Because every time they take a deduction out of your paycheck, they don't immediately send that to the federal government. They accumulate it in a liability. And when it comes time to pay, they have to add them all up. And this is an example of what they would send to the federal government. FICA deductions for, from the employee, from the employer also. So you see it's double. They deduct this from the employee's paychecks, and then they had to match it. Sometimes it's a penny off or so, but it's matched in essence. Same with a FICA. And then here is all of the federal income tax withholding that they've collected. Remember, they take it out of your paycheck, and they're just holding it until they pay later. That's a big service. Imagine if we had to do this on our paycheck each month. Hey, so how much do we owe? This is simple adding, Alt equals. There's a problem like that, 1 or 2 in the textbook. All right, enter. All right, that's Chapter 5, Payroll. All right, we'll see you next chapter.